Can I just yap about being old and being in the modern gaming industry for a minute? So just as a quick bit of backstory, I grew up in the Duck Hunt days. Back in those gotta make sure it's on channel 3 for games to work days. During my childhood, my family wasn't exactly the wealthiest, but my mom always tried to make sure that she supplied us with the things that we loved. And for me, that was video games. I remember watching Dragon Ball Z as it aired on Toonami, and afterwards I was gaming down playing Star Fox 64 and Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer and feeling truly immersed in what were, looking back, absolutely horrible graphics, but in like a loving and endearing kind of way. I can't tell you how happy I was back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, just grinding away at Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong or replaying Chrono Trigger for the 1000th time. I kind of realized that this was a bit more than a hobby and more like a passion to know and understand the art form that is video gaming and the incredible work and love that goes into them. Well, some of them, but I'll get into that. During my now nearly 30 years of gaming, I've played hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, of video games, trying to master each mechanic, gain all the achievements, be the best I can be in each genre so I can be as knowledgeable as I can be in the subject. I mean, for some more perspective, my favorite games of all time are Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy X, and the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And now I'm known as a guy who plays survival games and extraction looter shooters. And after all this time, you know what I've learned? Modern gaming sucks. At least kinda, and here's why. It's literally just a slog of making meta builds. Everyone being as sweaty as they can just so they can try and prove that they can be better than the next person. There's not a damn game that comes out that isn't day one ruined by the best OP broken strat, or here's every secret possible, or every variation of that, making it impossible to keep up unless you make it your life's work to watch every video to keep up with what's getting patched, nerfed, buffed, scooted, slapped, boofed. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. So follow me on this. Back when gaming really hit its boom in like the 90s, 2000s, games weren't exactly too plentiful. I mean, yes, you still had a decent variety and we still had the standard heavy hitters we have today, but the collections were limited. And those big gaming companies that we have now were much smaller. The AAA games that we had were exactly what I said earlier with the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, Star Fox, or whatever Game Boy Pokemon game was coming out, which were not only limited by the hardware of the time, but limited by the fact that gaming was still taking off in the markets. This being also coupled with the fact that something called the internet was still budding at the time, so guides for just about anything were hard to come by, and that's only if you were capable of accessing the internet. And I feel like this caused people by default to really dig into games because that was their only choice if it was a game that they were interested in. I mean, just take old gaming myths for instance, like being able to find Mew underneath the truck in Pokemon, or even the old Herobrine myth in Minecraft. These things only existed because we didn't have the technology to just share every gaming moment and bust every myth the moment it came out. Being truly locked into a video game and getting into a new chapter or a checkpoint of a new game was only beat by being able to tell your friends at school and see where everyone else is, as you know, since we were all at the same point. Nobody looked up an XP guide, nobody looked up the meta builds, nobody was in a rush to beat the game, they were in a rush to experience it. I mean, yes, there were strategy guides at the time, big old book strategy guides that your cool friends had. Like, I couldn't afford that shit. And to be honest, for a while, I kind of thought that those feelings were over with. And that kind of love was just rose-colored nostalgia at this point. But then I remembered something. I'm just some doofus guy. And if I'm going to try and talk about something on the internet, I better at least find out if I'm wrong. And guess what? I was wrong. That kind of feeling can still be found in gaming, but you have to battle one big thing: marketing. I mean, in the 90s and early 2000s, we were slapped with some of the most iconic marketing to date. I mean, we had the real golden ages of things like Mario and Sonic. We had Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. We had the Donkey Kong franchise. We had Star Fox. We had Pokemon. And just a few short years later, we had the glory days of juggernauts like Halo and Call of Duty. I mean, the list goes on, and it took me a long time to realize that one of the biggest differences between then and now was that those were our AAA titles. The games that got shoved down our throats during those times ended up being hailed as not only the great games of their times, but the greatest games of all time because of the impact that they made. Each and every one of those games had an incredible amount of love, passion and dedication put into them, and those efforts have lasted the test of time. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some real crappy games back in the day. And I also realize that some of those franchises are still going very strong to this day. But nowadays, it's obvious that if you ask a kid what they're playing, most of the time there's a good chance that they'll say something like Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft. And I have nothing wrong with those games, especially Minecraft. And I've put a decent amount of time into all of them. But let me just put it like this. Could you imagine Banjo-Kazooie coming out on the Nintendo 64 and having a battle pass? Could you imagine playing Donkey Kong Country and having to pay an extra microtransaction in order to play as Diddy Kong? Nobody in the early days of gaming would have put up with that shit. And nowadays, the forefront of a lot of gaming companies is how can we make money rather than how can we make a good game. I mean, just look at the ridiculous amount of like AI shit and those weird games you see when you're like scrolling through Twitter or YouTube. I mean, I don't think battle passes are such a bad thing in some cases, but there are a tremendous amount of games coming out that just have been out that just want your money while putting in the least amount of effort. And it's a weird pill to swallow when it comes down to it, that could just be the state of modern gaming. Games that offer just enough of a game loop to keep you busy, while shoving more and more battle passes, cosmetic DLCs, and microtransactions in your face to keep you in a state of FOMO because, well, I mean, everyone's getting it, am I right? But let me tell you that it doesn't have to be like it is. If you've only been playing Fortnite, Apex, Call of Duty, listen, my friend, there's a whole world out there. Have you played Sea of Stars? Have you ever played Celeste? Have you played It Takes Two? Have you experienced Stray or Black Myth Wukong? Have you gotten some friends together to drink and play some Oh Baby Kart? If not, you're missing out. And I'm not giving any shit to you if you haven't played these games. And I'm not giving any shit towards Fortnite, Apex, or Call of Duty players. I'm just saying that if that's all you've been playing, I feel like you're very much missing out on what I believe is the true essence of video gaming. Having fun, telling stories, and maybe even challenging yourself or your individual perception of things. Modern gaming doesn't suck. Modern marketing does. Businesses and executives who have no idea how to make games suck. And it's up to you to expand your own horizons and look farther if you feel like modern gaming is lacking. I mean, there's literally a whole world out there. And how about this for all of my older gamers out there? If you have a game from back in the day that you loved and feel like you haven't experienced something like it since, comment it below and I'll try to give you a recommendation on what I think could match what you're going for. Also, like and subscribe if you're new here, please. But yeah, when it comes down to it, I just wanted to yap to you guys about some of my thoughts about gaming when I was growing up versus gaming now, and how I think they could be the same when it comes down to it. But it's just a much harder challenge nowadays to navigate the gaming space without feeling exhausted and falling back into the default games. And I mean default games by the ones you end up playing because you just can't find anything else. Or my personal favorite, there are just no good games coming out. But regardless, I hope whatever game you play helps you escape to a new world. I hope it tells you a good story, and I hope you have a great time goofing off with your friends. And whatever you choose, I hope you feel the rush of not only beating it, but experiencing it. Foxy out.